Thank you so much, Jimmy. Let me start my presentation by acknowledging and recognizing Honorable John Anderson and the leadership of the Crawford Foundation in general, and really appreciating the opportunity to talk to you all, to engage with you all in this conversation that we have had over the last 2 years under the Food Systems Summit that was led by the Secretary General. It's a pity that I'm not able to join you in Australia. I would have loved to. When we started up this summit, my ambition was that we reach each and everyone to the extent possible and make sure that we really are joining hands in the transformation of our food system. So really, I feel the gap in the inability to be there and really engage you personally. But this is the times we are living in, and I'm going to talk to you through this Zoom conversation. As many of you know, the Secretary General in 2021 in 2 years ago launched what we now call the Food Systems Summit, the 2021 Food Systems Summit. At the beginning, at the World Food Summit of 2019, actually, that's every year we do have a commemoration of the World Food Day, and on that day, he really stepped forward and decided he was going to launch the Food Systems Summit. A few months later, 2 months later, probably exactly the same time as 2 years, same time today, I got a call and I was asked to be part of leading this summit. And I already have a day job. I work as a full-time president of the Alliance for Green Nutrition in Africa. I have 2 kids, and I wasn't looking for another job. But I've been working on the African continent for some time now in the agriculture sector. And the challenge that we see every day in terms of how farmers are struggling, in terms of how the continent had started recovering, but that recovery now seems like far-fetched. I just thought that this is not something that you let go. This is a story that gets told, but this is an opportunity to work with everybody else to find the solutions of some of the challenges we are looking through. So yes, I said yes to the challenge. And now I'm going to tell you the story of how we did it. The story of the last 2 years of how we really set in motion a process that would help us engage the world and ensure that we come out with a clarity of how we might be able to transform our food system, clarity of understanding of what the challenges of our food systems are, clarity of ensuring that everybody in the world understands their role, but also then I'll try to make sure that as I end this conversation, I share with you a few reflections that will be able to help us understand how we go forward from here. So just to go back to the day that the Secretary General launched the Food Systems Summit in 2019, what he was looking for was just to ensure that we do use the power of food, we unleash the power of food to deliver on all 17 SDGs. The Secretary General did mention that food has the ability to help us deliver across all 17 SDGs. And he also recognized that food is so powerful. It is important to all of us. It's the thing that brings us together as families, as communities, as nations. It underpins many of our cultures. And it is a huge economic opportunity for lots of countries around the world. So he was like, if there's one thing that can bring us together in a conversation, we need to go and start working on how we might fix our food system. But also he was recognizing that our food system is becoming a challenge of our environment and how we deliver. And I'm going to take you through all these things. So when he launched the Food Systems Summit, he was recognizing, and I'm going to go through all these challenges that he recognized. He was recognizing the fact that we've been at this for some time now, at the whole idea of producing enough food for some time now. And Australia, you would know this. You're one of the countries and continents that really figured out very early on to deal with the challenge of food. You're one of the countries that have really used food as an opportunity for economic growth. But despite that, despite what we are doing as a world, despite the fact that we figured this out a few years ago, over 50 years ago, we still have millions of people that are hungry. We have 820 million people that still go to bed hungry. Even though that number has gone up because of COVID-19, but there's no question that we do have this number in our midst. We do have a huge number of people that are malnourished. We still have people's potential being completely diluted by the type of vitamins they have in their diets. We still have over 45% of the children of this world, especially in developing countries, living out of their potential because of malnutrition. And yet, on the other hand, we have over 2 billion people that are obese and living with overweight, and as a result, subject to all sorts of diseases. This is part of our food system. In the midst of all that, our food system is contributing to climate change. We now know that 30% of contribution to climate change comes from our food system. But the most significant damage probably coming from our food system is to biodiversity. We are losing biodiversity at such a rate, 70%, 80% in fact is the figure that we are not now talking about, of biodiversity loss comes from how we manage our food system and what we are trying to do to get food, driving down the cost of food at any cost. These are things that need to stop. But also then, as Jimmy said in the introduction, we now know that hundreds of zoonotic diseases are beginning to impact our world in ways they haven't before because of the proximity of our food system, the close proximity of our food system is getting with our environment, probably too close for comfort. Therefore, there's no question that we need to do a few things going forward. We definitely need to deal with the challenge of hunger, paying attention to nutrition and the challenges in our midst around nutrition. We need to shift consumption habits and be a little bit more aware of how our consumption and diets can be more sustainable for people and for our planet. We need to fix our environmental challenges. We need to start thinking about how protecting our environment and thinking about its regeneration capability might be part of what we do going forward. We need to think about equity. The COVID-19 has shown us that there's so many people in our world that are living outside the ability to be able to feed their families with a decent meal. This is something that we need to address. And we need to address the challenge of resilience. There's a whole lot of people that are living from one shock to another. Here in Africa, we have gotten used to the fact that out of every 2 seasons, 1 season is going to be failed. So that these are things that we have to fix. We can't postpone these. These are not things we can pass on to the next generation. These are things we have to deal with today. And in fact, from my own personal priorities, I tell you that from an African continent perspective, I'm 100% committed to ensuring that as a continent, we understand what is at stake. We understand the link to the farming systems we're having today to climate change. Today, African farmers still get yields at the expense of the environment. 30% of our production comes from using new land nearly every year. Again, we have a huge impact on biodiversity loss. And these are things we can definitely do something about. So with all this in mind, we put the food system process in motion and really focus on a few things. We really focused on how we might use the food system to recover from COVID-19. We might use the food system to come through on SDGs, and we might use the food system or our thinking of the food system to start understanding the type of transformation that are required in our food system. So we needed to be bold, we needed to be ambitious, and we needed to go as far as we can. So we focused first of all on making this a people's summit. What type of people do we need to bring on board? Where, when, who is being left out, and who needs to come in this conversation? So we really cast our net very wide. I was telling the team as we started that we need to reach 5 billion people meaning every adult on this world needed to know what is at stake from a food system perspective. Each of us eats 3 times a day, outside the 811 million people that are struggling with food. The others eat 3 times a day. And each of those has an implication on our food system. And so we needed to bring in as many people as possible. So we made it a People's Summit. And I would really be telling you how that has worked. In that making it a People's Summit, we reached out to a diversity of actors. We reached out to consumers, we reached out to private sector, we reached out to civil society, we reached out to youth and indigenous people in new ways. We had a scientific group that had a network of over 25 scientific institutions that really were working to ensure that what we do in the Food System Summit is anchored in science. We literally opened the door to everyone to ensure that the conversation was happening in all corners of the world. We have since had thousands of independent dialogues, in fact, hundreds of independent dialogues. In fact, the other day we celebrated 1,000th independent dialogue. And independent dialogues are spaces where different groups of people who are not coming together because they are part of a government, but who are coming together because they care about where the world is going and where the food system, what the impact of food system is having, really have conversations around how things can change. We also really put governments in the driver's seat of being able to understand that at the end of the day, this work happens at country level, and governments are going to have to come through on their responsibility to lead. And so governments have had hundreds of dialogues, over 600 dialogues now, and we are going to be seeing what all that has resulted into. But we also made it a solutions summit. In addition to reaching out to as many people as we could, we also wanted to ensure that we are mobilizing as many ideas and many solutions as possible. We don't have a whole lot of time, so this was not the time we get to sit and talk shop in summits or whatever, but this is the time we thought that we would have to build on what we already have. And what we already have are thousands of ideas sitting in so many different spaces, in so many different institutions that we needed to bring together. So we put in place action tracks across areas, the areas that I mentioned that are very critical to our food system. And through these action tracks, we are able to mobilize over 2,200 ideas, which have since been clustered in 52 solution clusters. And the thing about a solution cluster, this is the place where you find institutions behind ideas and the people behind these institutions really sitting and available to help countries, to help different people deal with the different challenges of our world. So for example, just to give you an example, we have things like sustainable livestock. So if you have a community that is trying to understand how to address the challenge of sustainable livestock, we have a whole solution cluster that brings all the institutions under sustainable livestock and all the experts under sustainable livestock in one place where you can, at a click of a button, be able to understand who to go to and where to find ideas from. So yes, this was really about mobilizing and building on ideas we already had. We also chose to lean into courageous conversations and really talk about trust and the whole idea of the erosion of trust within our midst. If you followed the summit closely, you know that there are a number of people in the summit that were not happy about certain things, especially around private sector. But you know what? When you do have challenges in your midst, the easiest way to deal with them is to probably face them, look them in the face rather than push them aside. So what we did was also to make sure that we are encouraging people to talk about what is not working in our system, what part of our society is not delivering the way we should be delivering, and why, and really just try to make sure that those spaces were becoming available. We definitely would like private sector to do things differently. There are opportunities for them to do things differently, whether it is from a nutrition perspective, whether it is from a business perspective and rethinking business models, whether it is all the things that could happen to impact our environment and the opportunities they have to do things differently. They, like our governments, have to rethink their models. And of course, our governments have to rethink our models too. Right now, we have an agriculture sector that is driven largely by subsidies that are probably influencing the wrong behavior. And there was the scientific group actually did write a whole paper on this. and the opportunity to repurpose these subsidies so that we can enhance better behavior for people and for the environment is sitting right there. So these are all conversations that we needed to have. All the conversation around consumers and how each of us, you and I, waste so much food, contributing to the $1 trillion loss of $1 trillion in waste of food, and in fact, 8% emissions. These are things we don't need. These are things that we can do without. But also then, we also recognize that we needed to engage civil society better and have them engaged better. And much as they're representing the issues that are very critical to us and are very important to us and want to have those issues out, we made it very clear that there were spaces in the summit where they could come in and address those issues. We welcomed them. Many of them did take that opportunity. Many of them decided to voice the issues from outside. We did take note of those issues, and we still encourage all of us to sit around the table when an opportunity like this presents itself, so that we can build trust rather than continue building differences among us. The results of the summit, all these processes were very critical to ensuring that we have a few critical things going forward. The most important thing we had going forward was the Secretary General's statement, really being very clear around areas where he wanted to see governments providing action and providing leadership. He has highlighted 5 areas. First, most important part around nourishing people, and the second one around coming through on environmental issues, the third one being around coming through on equity, the fourth one being around coming through on resilience, and the fifth one being coming through on how we implement all these things. So he has highlighted 5 areas that he will be monitoring in his statement, which will be coming to every 2 years to see the progress we are making. But so did member states step forward in a strong way. We had 64 member states stepping forward. Of those, we had over 90 heads of state and government, exactly 77 presidents stepped forward to talk about the work that they had been doing, preparing for the summit, but also their commitment as individual countries on how they were going to step forward. We also had, by the time of the summit, we had 148 countries having national dialogues. These national dialogues are spaces where countries are coming together to discuss how different sectors get to work together to deliver a food system transformation. And those transformations are delivered to the summit process through what we are calling national pathways. 103 national pathways were delivered by the time of the summit, and the number of national pathways are still growing, 110 now. I was particularly proud that the African continent engaged very well. The African continent and probably many other developing places probably had reasons not to engage in this summit, because the question I keep getting is summits and summits and summits, then what comes out of it? What we told them was that this was going to be different. It was going to be different in the sense that it engages and needs all of us to engage. It's not about who owes who what. It's not about who helps who deliver what. It's about how we as a world are engaged and how we as individuals start delivering together. So I really was very proud to see that the African continent stepped forward, not just as 49 countries that were engaged, but with a clear common continental position that is informing how they go forward and whose key indicators are being put forward to adjust the continental framework they have on food, so that they can they can also add food systems indicators. We did have a number of countries come together in what we are calling coalitions. Coalitions are spaces and areas where people felt like no one country, no one nation, no one institution can come through alone. So we had 30 stakeholder coalitions. Examples of these are something like school feeding coalition, which is extremely important to the 321 million children that are going without a meal. We have coalitions like sustainable production. We have coalitions like Blue Food. We have a number of coalitions that were launched. We have coalitions like Aims for Climate. All these are extremely important to helping us think through how we come together as a community. We did have 230 other commitments in terms of we provided a commitment registry, and again, remembering very well that the Secretary General had called for all of us to commit to doing things differently. In that commitment registry, we have over 230 commitments, something as small as a community in Nepal committing to reduce the amount of erosion on their slopes, to something like as big as, like I said, the School Feeding Coalition, which has over 40 countries subscribed to it, and a number of institutions. We did engage lots of networks, and you will see that we did have what we are calling constituency statements as well. In each coalition, in each constituency we engaged, whether it was producers, whether it was civil society, whether it was indigenous people, whether it was private sector and youth, we each told them, and we are very clear, that we come here not looking for answers from other people. We come here looking to provide answers ourselves. So we asked them to tell us how they would provide answers to the problems we are having as a world. And they did provide declarations, and these declarations contain their commitments of how they see themselves as a community contributing to how our world is changing. In many of these meetings, we always come, many of these summits, we always come expecting someone else to solve the problem. Here, we put a whole lot of emphasis on the solution of the problem starts with you. What is your commitment? And as individuals, we put a whole lot of emphasis on that. And we did get declarations from all these communities. We do have a compendium that out of all these commitments that we put together, and that it's available on the Food System Summit website. We do have a science reader, which has put all the papers done by the scientific group together, and you can have access. You have access to that. You can look at it, and it really puts out a world-class material that helps shape where we are going. Of all the things that I feel we achieved, that was a surprise to me, but probably the most gratifying of this whole work, was just how much we elevated discourse on the political relevance of food systems and the global agenda, and how countries, individuals, communities, how everybody is thinking differently about food. We set out to change the paradigm around food, to move from food to food systems, to move from silos to systemic thinking. We feel that we've gotten that thinking on the table. Of course, the question is how we go forward and how we deliver on that paradigm shift. And I'll come to that in a second. But there's no question in my mind, or anybody who has participated in the summit, that we definitely did elevate the discourse on food systems. Specifically in Australia, we saw Australia, since I'm speaking to you all from Australia, we saw Australia engage in a number of ways. A number of food systems dialogues did happen. We saw engagement in action tracks that I said earlier, leading to the number of ideas that I talked about. We saw participation in some of the emerging coalitions. And from someone who was managing the food systems Secretariat, we also saw contribution that was focused on supporting developing states and small island states so that they can participate. The participation we saw coming from developing countries and seeds was really mostly because we did have resources to facilitate their participation. And I just want to recognize that Australia did provide leadership here. Is this what we are looking for? To a large extent, yes, but we also want Australia to post its food systems pathway. We want Australia to have its food system strategies out there. We want Australia to provide the leadership that we are looking for, recognizing fully well that this food system conversation, this food systems transformation is not a developing country agenda. It is as much a developed country agenda as it is a developing country problem. So there's none of us can succeed if all of us don't engage. So I'm just saying that to really encourage Australia to be able to finish some of the processes that we have started. So we'll be looking forward to you posting your food system pathway and really learning from the strategies that you're designing. You do have a lot of work done. You do have a lot of research. You do have a lot of work in climate smart agriculture that the world can benefit from. So please do put that forward and really be part of leading from the front and really supporting everybody else come through. So to follow up all this work, the Secretary General has put in place a hub which will start in January. So by saying that, I'm basically telling you that the Secretariat's work, the Secretariat which I was leading, closes its work by end of this December. And it's really important that we do that. It's really important that we shift from a summit thought process, a dialogue thought process, where everybody is engaged in the conversation, to an action thought process, where everybody focuses on delivering. So I'm really happy that my team and I have gotten us this far. And I'm really also happy that my team and I need to close business on dialogues, and so that a new team can go on with a focus on action and coming through, so that the world can get the message that it's actually time to shift GI to something that is called implementation and action and more action. So the hub, which will be based in the Secretary General's, the Director General's office at FAO, is an independent hub that will support coordination to ensure that we keep thinking food systems approach and avoid falling back to silos. It will ensure a report back to the Secretary General so that at the end of the 2 years, the Secretary General can get a report that he can take to heads of state around the commitments they made and around how well we are coming through on those commitments. And to ensure, the hub will ensure that we maintain connection and engagement with the world out there that was really engaged in the right way, the world that we reached out to, the producers, the indigenous people, the youth, that we engaged in new ways and help them understand their individual roles. The hub will also focus on how they continue providing support to that community so that they can continue understanding their individual, but also they can start shaping how we all deliver together. Now, fast forward, I want to share a few reflections on some of the things that we must be looking at as we go forward. There's no question that the summit has set us on the right path, but again, setting out well is only a quarter of the journey, as a very popular Spanish proverb says. We are definitely, our foot is in the right direction. Our minds headed, are all, engaged. Our institutions and countries are all engaged, but it's just the beginning. The rest of the work really needs to happen. We need to start demonstrating that we can deliver outside silos, that we can work together as sectors. In my own country, Rwanda, I've worked with different ministries as Minister of Agriculture to be able to deliver on some of the challenges that we had. Again, recognizing that being a small country, you quickly hit your environmental limits. So being able to work together was important for us. So it's not that that this is not doable. I've actually seen it in action. These are things we can do. Sectors coming together and delivering together. And some countries are already beginning to think about that. Communities engaged in very, very deliberate and very significant ways. All of us aligning around critical issues as we've seen with coalitions. So this is something we can do. We are just beginning, and I'm 100% sure that we can deliver this. So these are the things that I'm thinking about as hunger persists and malnutrition and poverty and environmental degradation continues. As we strive to get a better future for our children and to deliver on the SDGs, but also as we remain on track to overshoot the 1.5 degrees, there's no question that we must focus on doing the right thing. And again, these are a few things that came to mind. First of all, we need to think about a holistic approach and how we get to do that at a country level, because at the end of the day, a country-led approach, empowering countries, irrespective of where, ensuring that we are coming together as countries with clear plans, with clear strategies, recognizing again that this is no agenda that is critical for a southern country and less critical for a northern country. I mean, here in Africa, we are impacted by climate change, and many of the farmers that lose crops every season don't even know what climate change is about and have contributed nothing to climate change. So there's no coming through unless we all work on coming through. So that's really important. Countries need to align internally, nations need to align regionally and globally, and we all need to really think through what coming together looks like. The second point I would like to raise is around embracing innovation. If there's one thing that has shown through all the solutions that we saw coming through, the 2,200 solutions that came through, there is no question that there's so much innovation out there. But also our world is headed in a very fast moving treadmill, you might say. We have to start thinking of what type of innovations we need to stay on course, but also to ensure that we are building sustainability in our system. Is it about different diets, as people are talking about meat alternatives? Is it about regenerative agriculture? Is it about more climate smart agriculture like you're doing, and more better tools to do that and new ways to do that? Is it about carbon farming, moving from the huge jurisdiction that we are seeing today to smallholder scale, recognizing fully well that these smallholder farmers are part of a global farming system? Or is it about the true value of food, recognizing fully well that we are paying in the wrong places? We are paying for nutrition or malnutrition and obesity instead of paying for good nutrition. We are paying for environmental damage instead of paying for good agricultural practices. These are things we must think through and we must innovate around. The third one is inclusion. I mentioned to you how COVID-19 has laid us bare on inclusion. It doesn't matter where in the world, each of us, in each of our countries, there are people that are living through the ability to put the right meal on the table. There are a number of people that are living just one season away from failure in their systems. There are people that are struggling to put food on the table, irrespective of where in the world. And there are people whose earnings have completely been eroded. And we have food value chains that are definitely not remunerating people for well enough to be able to put food on the table. So is this right? Is this how we must continue? We can't afford this. We need to do something about it. We need to be deliberate around inclusion, around women and how we bring them in our value chains, around youth and how we create jobs, but also around decent work and how our value chains remunerate people for the right type of work. We also need to continue leaning into courageous conversations. I told you how we started these conversations. And one of the things that gives me hope is just, for example, coming out of COP26, seeing how much countries were engaged around the type of changes we need to be having in our system, recognizing fully well that we will overshoot the 1.5 degrees. And you know what? It doesn't matter whatever economic systems we are nurturing today and we are protecting today, it doesn't matter. The crash will come if we don't do the right things. You ask me, living on the equator today, these farmers know that the crash is here already. For them, it's already here. So it doesn't matter. So those conversations around, or the type of energies we need, the type of factories we need, the type of whatever we need, you know, time has come for us to understand that we have a finite planet and we need to manage it as a finite resource. And we need to understand that we need to do it together. So whether it's a business working in the food value chain or it's a business somewhere else, these conversations need to be had. But also it's time to have the conversations around nutrition. Why would we have 1 in every 2 people having obesity when we know that the right thing needs to be done? We have the ability to fix some of these, many of these things that we are living with. But we also have to have the ability to have conversations that allow us to start remodeling our businesses. So we are people, we have creativity, we have the ability to do this. We just need to get it done. The fifth one is about putting science at the center of this. Even as I say all that stuff, I completely believe that it's about science and how science guides the decisions we make, the evidence that is in our midst, and how policies are informed by those decisions. But we do have that stuff. Let's not turn a blind eye. Let's not turn a blind ear. Let's do the right thing. And finally, I want to conclude on what I started with. I told you that we set out to reach individuals, to reach each one and every one of us, to engage them on what we can do as institutions. One of the things that I was proud of during the time of the summit is seeing Luis Fresco, who heads the Wageningen University, stepping forward and saying, you know what? We've just made all the research we've done over all the years publicly available so that countries that don't have the ability to do this type of research can have this material available to them. So I was like, thank you for your leadership. That's great leadership, recognizing that it takes many of our countries and our universities and our research institutions here thousands of years to get to where the Netherlands is with its research. So that type of leadership is going to be very critical. We need to start defining that type of leadership. Here at AGRA, we have the AGRA, the institution I'm leading, which has mostly in the past focused a lot on ensuring that farmers have access to good inputs, because when Kofi Annan started this institution, he thought that the missing link was the African farmers don't have improved seeds, don't have access to good fertilizers and good ways of applying those fertilizers. But things have since moved. We need to think about sustainable farming, and I'm trying to make sure that my institution understands that farmers that are doing farming have to have access to carbon farming, to understand what that means, to restoration, and really taking responsibility for some of the restoration that needs to happen. But so do governments need to understand that these farmers cannot work alone. So as a result, we are working with governments to help them understand the policy environments, the capacities that are needed to be able to really ensure that farmers in Africa too can move forward using the agricultural sector as an opportunity rather than a burden in which they're stuck in poverty. So that is the commitment that I have made in the work that I do every day. We have, in my institution, we keep asking ourselves how we all commit, and how we keep saying, we ask ourselves, and the constituents we work through a forum that we have on the continent, we ask people to talk to us how they will lead. So we say, how will you lead? I just told you how I will lead from an agro perspective and from an African perspective. I will pose the same question, and I posed it earlier to Australia as a government. How will you lead? I will pose it to ACIAR and CIRO on how you lead on your research and improvements of food systems, and I'll pose it to businesses and the private sector and really ask you, how would we lead our world going forward? How would you want us to lead? Do you all recognize, and I know you do, so I don't want to be patronizing about this. I know that we all do, but we have to ask ourselves the question, how will we lead? The one thing is for a fact, like I said earlier, our planet is finite. We have to make sure that in our lifetime, we use the incredible opportunity we have in our midst to do things together. The food system has really highlighted that and brought us together on the critical issues of our food system. We need to make sure that our legacy is defined by what we did well together to put our planet back on track, and not defined by how we left a huge burden to future generations. So if you ask me, there's only one option. Let's focus on transforming our food system. And I look forward to what you will do as Australia and what we get to do as a global community together, because I know there are so many people that are calling in from different parts of the world, and you all and us and I have a huge responsibility to leave this world back on track. So thank you again for giving me the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Agnes. Chairman John Anderson, ladies and gentlemen, Wow, what passion. You can see why when the Secretary-General approached Agnes, and even though she had no time, that she was not looking for another job, you can probably see, and Agnes, I don't think there's anyone left in the room here that is in any doubt at all why the Secretary-General knew that you were the person for the job. Yes. What a credit to the Crawford Fund and the reputation of the Crawford Fund and the leadership of the Crawford Fund to not only have a room full of people listening to you here tonight, Agnes, but also to have so many people, over 250 people online from a number of different countries, all here to talk about something that I know the Crawford Fund has been focusing on for many years and has been providing leadership for many years. And I'm really proud to say, as the chair of ACR as well, that ACR has also been leading the conversation in Australia in relation to the importance of food systems globally. Not just a food system here in Australia for our own communities and our own residents and our own consumers, but also the importance particularly of food systems, good food systems in some of our smaller neighbours and developing countries. One of ACR's 6 high-level goals is to, in fact, improve food security and reduce poverty amongst smallholder farmers and rural communities. Now, clearly, we can do better. And after 2 years of really a bit of introspection, haven't we? We've really been very focused on ourselves over the last 2 years. We've been really focused on whether we're safe. We're really focused on whether we're protected. We're really focused on this big COVID-19 thing. Nothing like a big multinational, global food systems conversation to actually shake us out of that sort of mindset and get us focusing again on things that are important. And as Agnes clearly delineated, good food systems are important for so many reasons. They're important, and some of the themes for this year's Crawford Fund conference in terms of biosecurity, health and trade, those things are why good food systems are important. They're important for economic development. They're important for human health. They're important for environmental sustainability. And all of us as global citizens have a responsibility to actually stand up to be not only part of the conversation, but to be committing ourselves, to be taking that responsibility ourselves, and to be taking a responsibility as a country to do what we can in terms of continuing the conversation that Agnes and her colleagues started through the Food Systems Summit. I'm really delighted that Australia has already signed up to a number of the conversations that are coming out of that Food Systems Summit, and I know that we look forward to taking part at ACR in some of those conversations too, about how we can continue to do what we do, which is marrying the world of research, industry and government to create better outcomes for some of our neighbours that are also going to create better outcomes for Australia as well. So I won't keep you because I know that dinner's coming out, but Agnes, I just wanted to thank you so much for your time tonight. I wanted to thank you so much for taking on yet another role. I wanted to thank you so much for your commitment to global food systems and the importance of them and the importance of the conversation and carrying on the conversation. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll ask you now to join with me and thank Agnes formally in the usual manner.